What you need in the building. How's everybody doing? How's everybody going? I hope everybody's well today. We're going to talk some boxing with you guys. And we're going to try and keep the topic boxing. Uh, Particularly, as you can see here, we're going to talk about experience and how important is it in boxing. And you guys are going to be the ones, again, contributing most of the time. We're starting a little bit late, but you guys can always participate by either talking in the chat section down below, as you can see, or to the side of me, whichever way that is. It could be this way, it could be that. Doesn't matter. And you can also join in the show, as happened yesterday. You can join in the show, and you can give your contributions and your point of view. And that's what it's all about. It's all, again, what you need is what it is. So we let the fans do the talking. And it's good to hear the fans talk. It's good to hear you and your voice. And instead of having call-in shows or shows where, you don't get a direct say. You only get to talk in the chat section, and you can't really get a direct say as to what you want to say. Why not do it on this show? And again, nobody's going to necessarily attack your opinion. It's your opinion. Be respectful on here. Mute your mic before you come in. But again, we want to hear your take on it. I have my own personal opinions about the whole thing, and I will share my opinions after. But I would prefer if you guys share your opinions on the subject matter. It was very interesting yesterday, hearing the opinion of a fan right here on this program. So guys, chime in, jump in when you want to. I'm busy doing other things because I'm always busy doing other things with my time. So even though I'm in the middle of doing something, like right here, right now, trying to just set this up so that I can go ahead and cook a meal. All right. While that's going on, again, we can address the topic at hand. Now, let me show you what we're going to do so we can proceed with the program, because it does have a form. So as you can see, the question is experience a key to fighters staying on top? And where does it veer away from being key? Let me give you a perfect example of that. So for example, Vasily Lomachenko, highly experienced fighter, both in the amateurs and had a lot more experience than Teofimo Lopez in the pros, right? And he had faced a lot more world champions than Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez beat Vasily Lomachenko, right? He came back and he beat him, and he beat him quite easily, and handily, should I say. And so what made that possible? And so the question is, how do we determine how much experience is the key, how much smarts and IQ and studying a fighter is the key? So these are the kinds of questions, because as we know, with Floyd Mayweather versus Canelo, Floyd said experience was the key. So what is this experience that is being talked about at the championship level? And we'll try and isolate it and figure out what it is today, so that you understand. As you can see here, we're not talking about anything but the divisions that Mr. Canelo Alvarez is at present. Mr. Canelo Alvarez is he has covered. So the weight classes that and champions that he might be dealing with, we're really specifically looking at here. As you know, yesterday we were talking about the topic is Canelo the cherry picker. Is he a cherry picker, et cetera, et cetera? And different people have views on that, and you guys shared your views on it. Some of you shared it in the chat section, some of you shared it otherwise. And today we're going to kind of follow up with that, talking about experience and how much it plays a factor or role in how, fights can be, whether they can be competitive or not. So there's some stats and some information I want to share with you guys, and then you guys can go through the thing how best you see. But as you can see, scrolling across the screen, it says, how much will top tier experience play a role for top fighters from 160 to 175? And what we're going to do is going to examine the resumes of the top tier fighters from 160 to 175, potential Canelo opponents. And then we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at a set of other factors like, you know, skills and the eye tests and the abilities of these fighters. And what do we think about that? Okay. So we're going to look at the resumes of Triple G. I'm just showing you the champion resumes there, but there are other fighters who are worthy of talking about in Triple G's resume. As you can see, Triple G basically faced 6 world champions, okay, former, present, or future world champions. So he faced 6 of them. And we look at Canelo's resume as well. He faced 16 world champions so far. And you can see by far his resume is ridiculous as it scrolls across the screen there. And then you have Jamal Charlo, who faced 3 world champions, 3 future, present, or otherwise world champions. So he's had 3 world champions. And we have Billy Joe Saunders. He also faced 3 world champions. Oh, will be facing 3 world champions because he's going to face Canelo. He actually faced 2 so far. David Benavidez, he has faced 1 world champion at present. Caleb Plant has faced 2. Okay. His most recent world champion was Caleb Truax, who he faced. Truax is known as a tough opponent out there. Demetrius Andrew surprisingly has faced no world champions. No world champions. He's faced some worthy contenders and some notable names, but no world champions. So that's very interesting. Chris Eubank Jr., strangely enough, has actually faced 3 world champions, lost to 1 of them, which was George Groves. So that's an interesting statistic right there. And then you have Dmitry Bivol, who has faced 2 world champions, and Arthur Beterbiev. That's the other top tier world champion there. And he has faced 3 world champions. Now, what's very interesting about this whole thing is the ages of these champions. So strangely, Arthur Beterbiev is the 2nd oldest champion in all of the champions that we see. The 3rd oldest champion is actually Demetrius Andrew. So these are some very interesting statistics, and that Gennady Golovkin is the oldest. So Gennady Golovkin is 38 years old. Gennady Golovkin is 38 years old. Okay, and he's faced 6 world champions throughout his career. 6. That's it. 6 world champions, former, present, future. 6 world champions in his entire career. Yes, let that cement in your head a little bit. 6 world champions. And he's 38 years old, okay? Now, the next oldest person on this listing is actually Arthur Beterbiev, and he's only faced 3 world champions. That's pretty okay. I mean, 3 world champions. You just became world champion very recently. It's not like you were world champion for a very long time. And those 3 world champions, 2 of them he faced when he was not a world champion, which is Cloud and Campillo, Boris Cloud, and Gabriel Campilla. Gabriela Campilla. And then he also faced Alexander Gavorsnik in a unification fight, in which he beat Alexander Gavorsnik. Now, having said all of that, he's pretty old. I never thought about it, but Arthur Beterbiev is pretty old. He got some knowledge on him. And I'm pretty sure he was fighting a lot in Eastern Europe. But, his pro career is not that long. Now, the next oldest person here is Demetrius Andrew, like I said before. And what's ironic about Demetrius Andrew is he hasn't even faced a world champion yet. So in his entire career, he has fought for vacant titles. He has fought secondary champions, but they're not the real world champions. He has never fought a real world champion. And that, to me, is astonishing because there are levels to the sport of boxing. I don't care how much skill you have. There are levels to the sport of boxing. He's 33 years old. So he's on the verge of coming out of his prime. And all the other guys are actually very young. So you have David Benavidez, who's 24 years old, for example. So he's just starting his championship career, even though he's been a 2-time world champion. He's only faced 1 world champion. Okay. Then you have Jamal Charlo, who's the same age, a little older than Canelo. Canelo's born in June, I think. Jamal Charlo was born in May. So Jamal Charlo was 30 years old. He's a contemporary of Canelo. Billy Joe Saunders is also young. He's 31 years old. So he's also a youngster. So we've got a bunch of youngsters up in here. We've got Canelo, who's 30 years old. Jamal Charlo, who's 30 years old. Billy Joe Saunders, who's 31. Caleb Plant, is 28 years old. He's younger than them. And then you have Chris Eubank Jr. And Chris Eubank Jr., I don't know how old he is. Let me see. Chris Eubank Jr. is 31 years old. He's 31 years old. So they're all around the same age. They're all young guys. They're still in their primes, and they'll be in their primes at least for 2 more years. So that's very interesting. All right, when you think about those guys. And I think Dimitri Bivol, if I'm not mistaken, Dimitri Bivol is also a youngster. Dimitri Bivol is 30 years old. So Bivol, Charlo, Canelo, they're all the same age. Plant is a little bit younger than them, I think 2 years junior to them. Then you got David Benavidez, who is the youngest of the bunch. And you have Eubank Jr. and Billy Joe Saunders. They're the same age. They're a little older by a year. So that's the kind of champions that we're seeing right now running through this place. And what's interesting about this is when you look at the experience Canelo has compared to all of those other guys, he just kind of dwarfs them, right? In terms of caliber of opposition. So I just pointed that out. We're going to go through who these people were, the opposition that they faced. And also we're going to talk about the opposition that weren't world champions at any point in time. But why is it important we talk about world champions to start with, right? You could have a good world champion, you could have a crappy world champion. That's why you have to look at the name. You could have a guy who was a world champion, but he was just there for a brief moment and he's just gone. And he never really fought anybody that was, serious or effectual. So there's a lot to this thing that meets the eye. But the point is, when you've had experience facing a world champion or championship experience, and as anybody in the amateurs will tell you, when they spar a world champion, they get confidence because they know they can hang with these guys. So confidence is a very important factor, as we all know in boxing. And as Sergio Moro said so correctly, dangerous fighters are not necessarily fighters with power and strength. Dangerous fighters may have a style called thinking fighters where it's difficult to beat them because they're smart fighters, because their style incorporates a lot more complexity to it, such that you cannot find a way to beat them or win against them because they're either not easy to hit because they have pretty good defense, they're slick, and on top of that, they're hitting you, you're not hitting them, so they end up winning fights. So dangerous fighters for a fighter boxer's career are not necessarily strong power punches, and I think a lot of people get the wrong idea. Just because somebody's strong and they're punching and they're knocking out people doesn't necessarily mean that that would be the case for a particular fighter in a particular style, as we do find out. In fact, sometimes the fighter with the style that seems and the fighter with the history of not knocking out fighters knocks out that fighter who, has a style that everybody thought was the most dangerous style out there. And I think a lot of times people get caught up in that in boxing. And I think Sergio Moro particularly was somewhat offended when Chris Mannix started talking about power and strength, and these guys aren't real strength threats because they don't have the power and the pop. And it's never about that. In fact, sometimes in a fight, a guy, okay, he doesn't have one punch hit or quitter power, but he's very strong. What I mean, that's physically strong. He can move your body around. He can manipulate you around in the ring. And that's as important as, hitting somebody with a shot. So there's a lot of things people just don't understand. You can wear down a fighter just simply by, bodying them and physically manhandling them. And these are things that people don't think about. Again, mentally draining them so that they can't catch you, they can't seem to hit you, frustrating them, getting them to hesitate in their offense and their attack, making them burn up a lot of real estate, moving around the ring excessively, changing the pace of the fight so that they're not operating in their comfort zone at the pace they want to operate at, whether it's slowing the pace down so they're frustrated because they're not operating at their rhythm, or speeding the pace up above the pace that they're used to So taking the pace up, making them burn more energy. So it's all these kinds of things that, are involved in a fight. It's not just a straightforward thing like power and speed and quickness and strength. It's not just those factors. And I think a lot of people just don't understand that. That's why some fighters appear as if they're not making an effort against other fighters. It looks like they're just not doing anything. It's because they've been neutralized. Okay. The other fighter has neutralized their skills. And sometimes fights look easy, but they're not easy fights. I'll give you a perfect example. So when Floyd Mayweather faced Manny Pacquiao, he made that fight look easy. He made Manny Pacquiao look like he wasn't really doing anything effectively. But when we saw Manny Pacquiao, paired up with a Timothy Bradley, or paired up with Jesse Vargas, paired up with, and this is after the Mayweather fight we're talking about, Adrian Broner or even Keith Thurman, he looked a completely different fighter because he was allowed to do what he likes to do in that ring. And that what he likes to do, and the tempo at which he likes to fight, and the pace at which he likes to fight, and the angles that he likes to get, he was allowed to do so by the other fighter who was oblivious to what he potentially could do and how he evolved as a fighter. So it's these sort of things that I try to talk about in boxing so that people would benefit from it and actually get to understand boxing a lot more. But like I said before, this is not my time for me to talk. It's your time for you to talk. So if you want to join this stream, join on this program, click the join button and hop on. And let's talk about this topic right now. How much will top tier experience play for top fighters at 160 to 175? How much does championship experience play a major key in fights? That's the question that I have for you guys. And again, it depends on a lot of factors, right? So we're going to talk about it. We're going to go through it. And this stream, again, is for you guys. So you guys are going to have to hop on and say your piece while I'm busy doing some other things with my time. You guys can hop on. And, of course, I talk about the best boxers. So you will hear me talking about Canelo all the time. You will hear me talking about Clarissa Shields all the time. Her fight is coming up Friday, so you guys should try to purchase that pay-per-view if you can. Okay. And she's, again, one of the best out there. And the question is, what is the best doing out there? What makes the best in the sport? That's the question you have to ask yourself all the time. And take those gems with you into whatever you're doing so that you can be the best at what you do. That's the key in these things. So we're talking about experience being the key here. And let's roll through it, man. Let's roll through it. You're invited to come on here as a guest again on the program. Waiting for you guys to come through. I saw one or two people just sort of pass through, peek through. I'm gonna talk about a side note about this whole thing that I always have a pet peeve about and a pet gripe. I noticed that people are very easy on Gennady Golovkin, but very hard on Canelo. I'll give you a perfect example of that. So Gennady Golovkin, first of all, he didn't even beat, in my opinion, Derevyanchenko to win the IBF title. Derevyanchenko should have had that IBF title, right? Well, let's leave that aside. His first defense of the title is against a guy who's a dud, right? Undefeated, but he's a dud. And how many times have we seen that in Gennady Golovkin's career, right? Very few people actually get infuriated to the point like how Teddy Atlas is going in on Canelo right now, to the point that they're saying what they're saying. And what's weird to me, in my opinion, is this. When Gennady Golovkin was pound for pound number one in the world, we know Gennady Golovkin faced Vanes Martirosyan, right? We all know that's a stay busy fight, right? he also faced, after losing to Canelo and going onto the zone, his first fight was against some guy who was undefeated, but what? Nobody knew who he was. He was not on that level in any way. And no one actually ever made a big deal about it. Okay? Now, why I say this is because they say, oh, Gennady Golovkin, he couldn't fight opponents and he was old. And I say to myself, what does that have to do with top tier position? If you're going to be hard on Canelo for something, then you got to be also equally hard on Gennady. But you can't say, oh, Canelo's fighting Yildirim when he should face David Benavidez. If he wanted to, I guess he could have said, well, David Benavidez, you're next, right? Because once again, in my opinion, I mean, it's just my opinion. Being the franchise champion, he could have called the shot. But from what I heard, the negotiation was that he had to face, if he wanted the WBC title, he had to face Yildirim to get it, to defend the title against Yildirim after he got that vacant title. That was the deal, some kind of deal. My personal opinion, he probably should have turned it down and said, "No, I'm gonna fight for the WBA, and I'm gonna get that WBC later." You know, because I want legitimate opposition to face. So let Yildirim fight it out with David Benavidez, but he wanted to become undisputed this year. At least that's the idea to keep going. All right. Now that's what the narrative is. I'm not saying yay or nay to that. My thing is, and this is the point. This is the point of this video, is for you guys to come in here and talk your piece on the situation. You guys need to talk your piece on the situation. Meaning, for a very experienced fighter like Canelo, is he allowed a stay busy fight? Is he allowed to have a stay busy fight between Yildirim before facing two other top level fighters, right? Because he's going to be facing Billy Joe Saunders next. And after Billy Joe Saunders, he's looking to take on the IBF champion, who at this present time is Caleb Plant, right? He's Caleb Plant. So I want to hear what you guys got to say about this. Let's talk about experience. Is it a major key when it comes to Canelo versus these other guys? And let's go through some of the champions and also some of the major fighters that these guys have fought. Not necessarily beaten, but they have fought, right? So let's examine the resumes of these guys. I'm going to examine them one by one. So let's start off with Triple G. Okay. So Triple G is 38 years old. Okay. And he faced 154-pound champion Kassim Uma, who gave him a pretty good fight, went 8 rounds with him. And this is, as Triple G is the WBA regular champion. The real champion was Felix Sturm. All right. So he fought Kassim Uma, who was a former world champion. He went on to face Gabriel Rosado. Gabriel Rosado was not a world champion, right? As you can see, I have all the world champions that Gennady Golovkin faced scrolling across the screen right now with Gennady Golovkin. So you guys can see that. But I'm going to talk about Gabriel Rosado. Gabriel Rosado has faced quite a lot of great names in boxing. Okay, he's faced Charlo brothers. He's faced Danny Jacobs. He's faced Triple G. He's faced Peter Quillen. He's been facing some name guys. Okay. The thing about it is, Gabe Rosado, has not been able to win a championship. But the one thing he can say is he faced the who's who in his divisions from 154 to 168. Okay. He's also faced El Perro Angulo, right? He's faced Angulo. So he's faced a number of guys, come up short a number of times, but he has a wealth of history. So Gabe Rosado is a name, and everybody knows who he is. Daniel Gill was a former unified world champion, WBC, WBA, after beating Felix Sturm. Triple G faced him. You know, Gill was on the downswing. He had lost his championship fights and everything, but he was another former world champion. Then you had Curtis Stevens, who never been a great boxer, had a lot of power and everything. Wasn't a great boxer or anything like that, but he was a name in boxing. All right, in the 160-pound division. And Marco Antonio Rubio was known for knocking out David Lemieux. He had some pop in his step. Again, not nobody that's top tier necessarily, but he was ranked in the top 10 at the time in the middleweight division. So he also faced Gennady Golovkin. Martin Murray. Well, a big shout out to Martin Murray. Martin Murray was a top contender in the middleweight division. He had faced guys like Sergio Martinez, gave him a really great fight. Triple G gave him a really great fight. Arthur Abraham gave him a really great fight and got his rematch. That's how good it was. But he never quite was able to make it to the top and become a world champion, right? And you got Willie Monroe Jr., who came out of obscurity. He had won a championship, and that had nothing to do with the legitimate sanctioning championships. But out of that sort of avenue, kind of like the contender, but it wasn't the contender, avenue for boxers, he was able to emerge and actually become an opponent for Triple G instead of Erislandy Lara. And, you know, Willie Monroe always talks about the Cuban school of boxing, not to put him down too much, but he hasn't really won any big fight of any kind since he's been in boxing. But hey, it is what it is, right? He's there and he's still eating. And he's now a name because Triple G made him a name. David Lemieux was a world champion. So it was the other world champion that Triple G faced. And then he faced a world champion in Kell Brook, who really came up from welterweight to face Triple G and actually performed pretty well for a welterweight against Triple G, even though he lost the fight and the fight had to be stopped. And then he had Daniel Jacobs. Daniel Jacobs was the first legitimate A-level opponent that Triple G faced in his entire career. So up to the point of very recently, Triple G had not faced a top-tier opponent. Okay, Daniel Jacobs was the first guy he faced that was top tier. And everybody thought Triple G would knock him out because, you know, early in Danny Jacobs' career, he was knocked out by another Eastern European fighter. And so they thought Triple G would just take him out. I never thought so. And I told everybody I think Danny Jacobs was going to surprise all of you guys. After I saw him knock out Peter Quillen, I thought Peter Quillen would knock him out. I thought Peter Quillen would have stopped him because, again, I got caught up in the hype of power. Peter Quillen had power, Danny Jacobs had power, but he had been stopped. And I never realized that Peter Quillen reaches with his punches. And that's what allowed Danny Jacobs to counter him, stun him, and get him out of there. So that was a great fight. You know, Quillen stayed on his feet, by the way. But Peter Quillen is not so much into boxing anymore. You can see that Peter Quillen now, he's doing his own thing, you know, elsewhere. And he lost to El Perro Angulo, right? Okay, good. All right. So Triple G has also faced Vanis Masterosian. But again, Vanis Masterosian is a 154-pounder. But he was also a top contender. Vanis Masterosian has never become a world champion. He's come close to it. And he's faced some really great names like Erislandy Lara, you know, the Charlo brothers. He's had those opportunities, but he's not been able of late to get much opportunities. I don't know what's going on with him in boxing. I haven't heard anything about Vanis since Triple G stopped him. I haven't really heard anything for his career, what they're doing with him, plan to do with him, etc. I don't think he's with Al Heyman either, so I don't know why he did that, but it is what it is. Of course, Triple G also faced Saul Canelo Alvarez, a world champion, and then he faced Sergey Kovalev, who gave him a lot for his money. I mean, Derevyanchenko did a number on him, right? Shevchenko made him work for his check. Okay, and he managed to get the decision. Judges, which it is what it is. Again, sometimes some guys deserve to be champion, but they don't get what they deserve, right? Shevchenko should have been the IBF champion, in my opinion. Even though Triple G dropped him, I mean, Derevchenko pretty much dominated the fight from round 4 onwards, in my opinion. But it is what it is. Should have been world champion, though, not Triple G. But it is what it is. That's just my opinion. Different people have different opinions. So that's Triple G's resume. Out of that, all those guys that are notable names that we should really be talking about in Triple G's resume, you only have 6 world champions. Now, when it comes to the next guy that I got to talk about and the depth of experience this guy has gotten at this early age of 30 years old, Canelo Alvarez, it dwarfs everything that everybody else talks about. And it's so strange. I got to be honest with you guys. It's so strange to hear people question this kid and talk about, you know, how I'm going to put it this way. How can you question a guy that his championship experience dwarfs any of these fighters I just mentioned? I mean, dwarfs it, like literally dwarfs it. Like the most these guys have ever faced cumulatively in terms of world champions is about 4 or 5, right? Canelo's faced 16 world champions. Look at it. It fills up the whole bottom of the screen. Can't even see it. It's scrolling across the screen, but you can't really get all of them to scroll across, right? That's just the first most important point there in the whole thing. So it's just, to me, it's just frankly ridiculous to say that Canelo's afraid of one style or the other style. I never quite understood that. But anyway, so early in Canelo's career, he faced a boxer type in Miguel Vasquez, notoriously difficult fighter to beat. Okay, Miguel Vasquez has been robbed of recent times, a couple times in welterweight bouts of recent times. But Miguel Vasquez was a lightweight and went up to super lightweight, faced Canelo. And I'm gonna say this: Canelo beat this kid twice. The only other fighter to do that was Timothy Bradley. Okay, but Canelo was the first guy to face Miguel Vasquez when he was undefeated early in his career. Okay, so Canelo didn't just face like Julio Cesar Chavez faced, you know, doorknobs and stuff. Canelo didn't really face doorknobs like that. In fact, he had a test against Leonardo Tyner, who was just notoriously difficult fighter to fight, very good boxer all around, you know, and not to the highest levels, but he had faced that kid and he didn't face him much. And then he also faced Miguel Cotto's brother pretty early in his career when he was still a teenager. So when you talk about Canelo being 15 years old and fighting pros, he's in the pros, he's fighting guys in Mexico. I mean, there's no way for me to really explain to you how impressive that is. Okay, his very first fight, he was like, "Don't worry, man, I'm gonna handle this dude," and he stopped him. He boxed him off the back foot, and he stopped him eventually. And very, very special fighter we're talking about when we talk about Canelo Alvarez, and the opportunities Golden Boy has afforded him makes him extremely special. Okay, now the Charlo brothers were brought along very well as well. But you're talking about a guy, okay, the Charlo brothers, you know, Jamal Charlo has faced 3 world champions, okay, right? Now, remember, we're not talking about the fighters, the good fighters that Canelo's faced who were not even champions, but they were names in his time. We're not even talking about them, okay? Because, all right, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but let's just get to, so 16 world champions, of which he lost to 1, which was Floyd Mayweather, okay? He's faced 16 present, past, future world champions, okay? And we're going to go through some of them, but we're also going to go through some other names who were not world champions. So Canelo, pretty early in his career, faced some guys who were not world champions, but really good opponents, all right? Now, one of the champions, world champions I haven't mentioned here, is Lovemore Endu. Lovemore Endu was the IBF world champion, and Canelo also faced him. I left him out of the equation for some reason. But Lovemore Endu is another world champion that Canelo faced, and it's not up on that screen there. And he faced him relatively early. He wasn't world champion when he faced Lovemore Endu. Okay. In addition to that, when he became world champion, he also faced some guys who were good fighters. They were names at the time, but they weren't ever world champions. Okay. One of them is the fighter that Josecito Lopez, the same Josecito Lopez that gave Keith Thurman problems, the same Josecito Lopez that broke Victor Ortiz's jaw, the same Josecito Lopez who has went up against Andre Berto. He got stopped, but the same Josecito Lopez who is fighting today and a very exciting fighter that everybody talks about, an exciting fighter. He faced Josecito Lopez. Now, Josecito Lopez had fought Marcos Maidana at so he was coming up from junior welterweight to fight Canelo at 154, I believe. They were fighting somewhere in between, maybe a catchweight or whatever. But Josecito Lopez, that the fight before that, faced Victor Ortiz and had beaten Victor Ortiz at welterweight. So this is very important to understand. He could have gone up or down, and Josecito Lopez mostly campaigns at welterweight. He's quite strong, quite big now. But at the time when he faced Canelo, he wasn't as strong and big. And he got stopped by Canelo. And he was doing pretty well. He was doing pretty well for that fight. But that's one of the fighters we should talk about. Who was now a world champion that faced Canelo. Of course, there are two others, James Kirkland and Alfredo Angulo El Perro, who beat Peter Quillen very recently and just lost to a Castillo guy. I thought he won the fight, actually, against Castillo, but it doesn't matter. And Alfredo Angulo stopped Gabriel Rosado. He was a name at the time. He was a force at the time. He never became world champion. And Canelo stopped him, right? And that was like Canelo's stay busy fight, sort of like. So those are just two other names that we won't mention here, but we have Migo Vasquez. Like I said, I didn't have him in there, but he was a world champion. Lovemore Endu. Matthew Hatton, which is Ricky Hatton's brother. He's a decent, good fighter. And you had also, I believe it's Brian Rose. Also, he faced. There were two British guys. Canelo ended up facing a lot of British guys in his career, and Brian Rose was one of them. And Brian Rose was a highly ranked fighter, but I still don't, still don't look at Brian Rose as this big fighter. He never really did much of anything. So, but Matthew Hatton, and again, Matthew Hatton had a lot. It was tough, but he didn't get stopped, but he got beaten up pretty bad. And Canelo also faced Carlos Baldomir. Of course, Carlos Baldomir was like 100 million years old, still trucking along, still fighting. Even after Canelo knocked him out, he still kept on fighting. The only thing that stopped him from fighting is going to prison for incest. All right. So, but Carlos Baldomir, having the fighting blood in him, faced Canelo as well. Then we had Kermit Central. Now, I don't particularly see Kermit. So Kermit Central was actually ranked the #1 super welterweight at the time Canelo faced him, which was really strange because he wasn't a world champion. He had actually lost to Paul Williams in a very weird way, by the way. He was beating Paul Williams, and then he just kind of threw himself out the ring. So I don't know what was going on there. If there was something going on the side, or the mob was holding them ransom, and he had to jump out the ring. I don't know what happened, but he just threw himself out the ring. There's no other explanation. He just swung and he just threw himself out the ring, which was weird. He was beating up Paul Williams at the time. But he ended up being the #1 ranked super welterweight because Paul Williams, I believe he moved up in weight into a new weight class. He went up to middleweight, I think, to face Sergio Martinez. And so as a default, Kermit Central was the #1 super welterweight in the world when Canelo faced him. Canelo just destroyed him, okay? He put on a great performance against Paul Williams, but then when he came back and faced Canelo, he just got beaten up, and bad. And that fight was stopped. Do I mention Kermit Central? Not really. I would prefer to trade him in for, say, for example, Pero Angulo or Pero Angulo. Now, James Kirkland, let me say this one. Why I don't really care to mention James Kirkland is because James Kirkland was coming down from tremendous weight, like he had a lot of weight, but he fought like James Kirkland. It's just that I don't think he was in the best physical shape he could possibly have been. I don't think the outcome would have been any different. I just think it would have taken a longer time for him to get knocked out. Okay. But then again, James Kirkland never really faced a fighter of Canelo's stature, to be fair. So, to be honest, Kirkland, with all his heart and everything and his conditioning, Canelo basically severed his senses from his body. And he was knocked completely out cold. So, I guess he would, even if he was in his best shape with Ann Wolf in his corner and everything, I really wouldn't have seen him standing a chance against Canelo when I think about it, right? But, he wasn't at his very best. He was coming back from a long layoff and all of that. And he put up a heroic fight for 3 rounds, don't get me wrong. And he was in there swinging. But I still believe that he probably could have been a lot better than he was. And he wasn't the world champion or anything, but I'm just saying. But Alfredo Angulo came off of the Erislandy Lara loss, in which he was about to stop Erislandy Lara, and Erislandy Lara hit him with a shot and blew his eye out like a big old golf ball. And that was his last fight. And then his next fight that he had was with Canelo. And Canelo just pretty much just outgunned him on every turn. It was like if he was some sort of cab driver or something. Just really carved him up like he was nothing, right? So those are some of the guys that weren't world champions that Canelo faced in his career. So we had Kermit Central and then Shane Mosley. The Shane Mosley fight, Shane Mosley was past it. No doubt about it. Shane Mosley was past it. But people thought Canelo was just going to carve him up and dispose of him. And remember, this is a Canelo who is, how old is he? He's about 20 now, 21. So he's very, very young. This is a young kid. Shane Mosley's got all this experience, all this veteran experience, behind him. So when Canelo faces Shane Mosley says, this young kid, he's not going to railroad me, right? He's not going to take me out. You know what I mean? And so Shane Mosley realizes that Canelo's not falling for some of his traps. And Canelo's also hitting him with some shots that he can really feel them. Like his liver shots are pretty devastating. And Moses is like, I'm in a fight with a kid that knows what he's doing. He knows what he's about. Because usually fighters at that time, at that age, they don't tend to have the experience, because remember, experience is the key. But this kid is showing that he knows a thing or two about the little tricks of the trade. And a lot of little tricks that they do in boxing, he knows them. So Shane Mosley is pretty much impressed with him, how solid he is. And of course, Mosley is using every single trick in the book he has to be able to stay on the ball, still engage, still survive, and make the fight something where he makes it to the finish line. Because he's beginning to realize that, the youth and the strength and the energy of this younger fighter is beginning to overcome him, right? So it was interesting listening to Mosley's account of it in an interview online. And again, Mosley had a ton of experience. And that experience would pass on to Canelo. Obviously, he would have learned a couple new things from Shane Mosley, as Sean Porter did with sparring Shane Mosley, just sparring. Canelo didn't spar him. He actually fought him. So he would have learned quite a lot from Shane Mosley. Then Canelo stepped up and he faced Austin Trout, right? Then he faced Floyd Mayweather, and then he faced Erislandy Lara. And I think that experience was a very good one for him because he was able to make adjustments and adapt to what we call the stick and move. Erislandy Lara is a master of the stick and move. Okay. Erislandy Lara likes to find the right spot where he, of course, has positioning on you. He wants to make sure he has lead dominance on you. And then he's going to try to stick you with the jab, probe you with the jab, or he might even lead with his right hand and follow up with the jab after. So he may do the reverse 1-2, which would be the 2-1. And then he's out of there, right? He's in, finds his spot, gets his opening, and he's out, right? And he keeps it moving. And sometimes he will stay stationary, but he's always maintaining range, right? He takes 2 steps forward, he takes 2 steps back, and so on. And we've seen it with Shakur Stevenson. We know the basic stick and move on the outside. There are many variations of that thing. And, guys can funk it up. They can put special effects in there. They can do all kinds of things. There are many different ways to do that. And the basic stick and move, that's what Erislandy Lara does. Guillermo Rigondeaux is a little bit more. He's got a lot more variation to his stick and move. Floyd Mayweather does a totally different kind of stick and move that just totally different sort of thing. Mechanisms completely different. So, in fact, Floyd doesn't even stick and move sometimes. He just stay right in the pocket. You just can't get him. So, having faced Shane Mosley and then having faced Erislandy Lara, I think Canelo realized how to deal with guys that move around the ring a lot. He has his own mechanism he uses to do with that, and especially guys who need space or they're trying to find space to create a distance between you and themselves. How he closes the distance, how he clamps down on that, how he sort of stymies their offense and their defense, right? So he kind of learned a lot from the Lara fight, I do believe, as well. And then, of course, after facing Erislandy Lara and saying how Lara was a runner, which is just hilarious. Anytime you got to tell somebody they're a runner, if you got to tell somebody they're running, that means you're not fully abreast of the situation because you're supposed to be able to handle that. Remember, it's any style you should be able to handle, right? And then he faced Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto. All right, so Erislandy Lara, of course, stick and move means you have to use the jab. It means you have to be a master of the jab, probing jabs, all the different kinds of jabs that you may have in your arsenal. Well, Miguel Cotto was the king of the jab. And Cotto was special in the sense that his jabbing hand, like Oscar De La Hoya, was his power hand. And he goes southpaw to use his jabbing hand as his power hand, right? So that's Miguel Cotto, king of the jab. And Cotto was just, he was just, working that jab. And of course, Cotto, all-time great, Hall of Famer, lots of experience under his belt. So Canelo was very fortunate to face that version, especially that version of Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto coming off many victories, having a lot of confidence, and a very strong 154-pounder, which Canelo was at the time as well. So that was a good fight. Canelo was a lot bigger. It was a closer fight than I expected. And I think that Canelo learned a lot from Miguel Cotto in terms of how he wants to execute, how he handles the jab. Because, like I said before, guys like Canelo, Pacquiao, Mayweather, they're counterpunchers. So they love that you jab. They love seeing different kinds of jabs. So, that's just what Canelo does. He nullifies the jab, takes away the jab from you. You saw how easily he took away Calum Smith jab, for example. Took it away from him, right? And Yildirim couldn't even get his offense going. Forget about the jab. He couldn't start nothing, right? Canelo shut that down. And we've seen this a number of times now with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. You've seen him shut him down. You've seen him walk down Gennady Golovkin, shut down, a lot of his systems, a lot of the things he does well. We've seen Canelo shut down. Well, he didn't shut down Danny Jacobs. Danny Jacobs had a lot of skill, but he nullified Danny Jacobs' jab because Danny Jacobs said the problem was that he didn't know how to get onto Canelo's rhythm. His rhythm was awkward, and it just threw him off. And so it ain't fault of American. I don't want to talk about that. And Liam Smith, well, Liam Smith, gritty European fighter, UK fighter. He's not on the level of his brother, obviously. And he succumbed to Canelo. He was putting up a decent fight, but he was way over his head against Canelo for several different reasons. But of course, Canelo didn't just pick that fight because he just wanted to make a statement that he was going down to 154 to show he was a 154 pounder because he got stripped of the WBC title, right? For allegedly ducking Gennady Golovkin. And then he went on to face Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And again, we saw the same thing. He neutralized Chavez Jr.'s jab. Chavez Jr. couldn't do shit. And so Canelo just took over and walked him down, right? And everybody was like mad at Chavez Jr. What Chavez Jr. is not doing anything. Well, Canelo took away his jab. What is he supposed to do? He ain't got no jab, right? So Chavez Jr. started brawling and he got tagged up. At first, it looked like he was coming at Canelo and doing something. And then Canelo just tagged his ass up, counterpunch, because that's what Canelo do. He's a counterpuncher, okay? Started counterpunching him. And Chavez Jr. was like, dude, I don't know what to do. So it is what it is. Triple G, well, everybody, I mean, people just got a natural bias for Triple G. It's just what it is. I keep on talking about it. But again, guys, I'm just talking because nobody's coming in here and joining as a guest on here. I think the Triple G thing is where Canelo really started getting enemies. The Triple G thing, I think, because everybody, including HBO, that was their ticket. That was their money man. Triple G. You know what I'm saying? Triple G was there. He was the future of HBO sports was hanging on Triple G. And Canelo just shut that shit down. And the amount of hate I saw people giving, up to this day, people saying Canelo lost that first fight. How the fuck? I don't even understand. The logic never made sense to me. How Canelo lost the first fight. This is my opinion, of course. You don't have to agree with it. But I'm going to say it again. I'm going to repeat this over and over again. I'm going to repeat it. I don't care what you guys say. This is my opinion. How can you have the superior reach, the height advantage? You got the size advantage. You supposedly a great jabber, so you got the jab advantage because Canelo's supposedly not a jabber. Okay, you got the strength advantage. You're bigger, you're stronger than Canelo. Okay, in that first fight, you cut off the ring really well. Everybody says you're excellent at cutting off the ring. You're supposedly this great technical boxer that hardly gets hit unless you want to get hit, right? All of that stuff Triple G is. And then he gets exposed. He's throwing combinations and hitting nothing but air and arms. He can't get none of his power shots to land. The only thing that he's getting to land, because Canelo's allowing him to land, is a little jab that he's touching Canelo's forehead with to find range. Okay? That's it. This dude should have killed Canelo. That's what everybody thought would happen, because Canelo's ducking him, right? Canelo's the guy that's ducking, right? He's afraid to face Triple G, right? He makes Triple G look like a clown for almost the entire fight. Canelo's gassed at a certain point in the fight. I think it was somewhere around like 7 or 8 round. He's gassed. He's literally tired. And he's still just easily getting out of the way of Triple G shots. Okay? Easily. Like it's like casual, like if he's just taking a stroll. I don't understand. I completely agree with Adelaide Bird and that 9-3 score. I cannot see how Triple G did win the 9th round. Canelo was trying to catch a break and he got tagged up. But he came back in the 12th. Yes, Triple G took the 9th, 10th, and 11th. I agree. But in the 12th round, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I never quite understood what people were talking about concerning the first fight and talking about Triple G's jab. And I'm like, his jab, he's jabbing Canelo, and Canelo doesn't even have a puffy face. He doesn't even have a cut eye, but his eye looks lumpy as crazy. How is that possible? It is everything that you're telling me I am not seeing with my eyes. I'm seeing something totally different. Never quite understood. Never quite understood. To this day, I never understood how people could say Triple G won that first fight. Me and what's his name? Jeff Mayweather and I see eye to eye. There's no way in hell Triple G won that first fight. Just never. This defense, the defense Canelo just shone so brightly. And then he's not throwing combinations all night long. But when he does throw combinations, they're mostly landing on Triple G. It's like 4-punch, 5-punch combinations we're talking about. So, okay, he's fighting in staccato bursts, but his staccato bursts are more effective than the few shots that Triple G's actually landing on Canelo. And we're not going to talk about those touch jabs. What we're counting ticky-tacks, he's not doing anything to Canelo there. He's not doing anything. He's not effective. If he was effective, he'd corner Canelo to land his power shots. Or those jabs, at least the power jabs, would have landed. They very, very rarely did. And Triple G did excellently in the 9th round. That's where he actually did something to Canelo. He actually did hurt him. But other than that, he did nothing to this dude. And people say, well, after the 2 Triple G fights, Canelo had confidence. Canelo knew these were easy fights. The first fight, he knew it was easy. At the end of the fight, he's stroking his beard like, I can't believe this. I can't believe that they're telling me that this is a draw. He can't even believe it. And I honestly can't believe it to this day. And this is one of the times where I actually agreed with the judge that called it right. And Adelaide Bird doesn't get her calls wrong. She's always correct. But the strangest thing about the whole thing is when people have this bias, Triple G was the salvation. Triple G, after Triple G lost to Canelo, HBO was done. We knew everybody's praising Triple G and Triple G this, Triple G that. Canelo never beat Triple G in the first fight. In the second fight, maybe Canelo won. And I'm listening to these clowns and I'm like, dude, there's no way in hell under the circumstances of boxing, you can tell me with a straight face that Triple G won any of those fights. And to prove the point, Triple G suffered wear and tear, so he had to come back to the zone and have a stay busy fight with, I forgot what the guy's name is, some undefeated dude who should never be in the ring with Triple G, right? And that dude was tagging up Triple G. And he was working on his defense. Why is he working on his defense? Why did he leave Abel Sanchez to work on his defense? Why you got to work on your defense? So everybody know if you didn't lose that fight, you didn't need to change nothing. You just needed to go back in there and do what you do. All right? Against Canelo. Because you really won. But you didn't win. He never won any of those fights. He got gift draw in the first fight. And in the second fight, he lost. That's why he lost. And they say it was a close fight. That second fight wasn't close. Wasn't close at all. And people know this. Y'all know this. I keep on saying it on my channel, but not change my mind. But anyway, the Triple G fight, Canelo beat Triple G. And then, of course, he faced Danny Jacobs. Now, Danny Jacobs, I don't understand. Like, there's some sort of political agenda out here. But Danny Jacobs is a more skilled fighter. I'm going to say it again. I repeat myself. Danny Jacobs is a more skilled fighter than both Jamal Charlo, Jamal Charlo, and Billy Joe Saunders. Why? Because Danny Jacobs can switch. He can go from orthodox to southpaw. He has more skills. He has more tools. Maybe not as sharpened as, say, a Demetrius Andrew does, but he has more skills. That's why I said more skilled. Not necessarily that he's sharper or more home skills, but he has a lot of skills. And again, against Gabriel Rosado, I thought that, just knowing boxing, I thought that Danny Jacobs was easily beating his ass. Easily beating him. But I guess he was coasting too much and he wasn't really taking up the intensity to show just how much he was beating the guy. So, because what did Gabriel Rosado land on Danny Jacobs? Think about it. What punches did he actually land? He didn't land a whole lot. And even Danny Jacobs versus Canelo was competitive in the later rounds. Danny Jacobs was coming back in that fight. So maybe people have they have a cultural line or something where, because Danny Jacobs got beat by Canelo and he said he was going to knock out Canelo or whatever, That people are like, Danny Jacobs, he ain't all that no more. Man, Danny Jacobs done. And blah, 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 blah. Because they disappointed that their guy didn't win. But at the end of the day, I think Danny Jacobs is an excellent fighter and a very well skilled fighter. I would love to see Danny Jacobs versus Jamal Charlo, for example. Love to see that. But I don't know if Jamal Charlo would want to face Danny Jacobs. That's the thing. I don't know. This dude, he making a lot of excuses about facing, for example, David Benavidez. He was calling out Danny Jacobs, and all of a sudden he stopped calling out Danny Jacobs. Well, we forgot about this. Danny Jacobs faced him man to man and said, "You want to make the fight? Let's make the fight." And he backed out. So all this talk about Jamal Charlo and Jamal Charlo this, but he didn't. If you really are about that talk, if you really about that smoke, when you talk, it will mean something. Otherwise, it don't mean nothing. You just got to wait to see what fight you gonna have next. That's how it goes. Otherwise, you just talking. Because Danny Jacobs was willing to make the fight happen with Jamal Charlo. He was willing. And Jamal Charlo, when he saw Danny Jacobs face to face, punked the fuck out. He wasn't like, let's make it happen. Danny Jacobs is watching him like, okay, man, you want a piece of me? Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. You want a piece of me? We're here face to face. You talking to the camera and all of that. He rolled up on him and was like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. You want to do it? Let's do it. All of a sudden, he wasn't saying nothing. Okay? He got mute. So I don't want to hear nobody trashing Danny Jacobs when Danny Jacobs done ready face Triple G, face Canelo, made a good account of himself on both counts. He kind of got going a little late in the fight with Canelo. And people saying, oh, Danny Jacobs is just an athletic fighter. My ass. He's not just an athletic fighter. Don't go there. Don't do that. Don't be disrespectful. Don't be disrespectful. Don't play politics with boxing. Right? And I hear something, because then if Danny Jacobs is an athletic fighter, then so was Timothy Bradley. Timothy Bradley wasn't a good fighter then. He ain't gonna be in the Boxing Hall of Fame though. So what does that mean? And we don't know if Danny Jacobs might end up in the Boxing Hall of Fame when all is said and done. We don't know. He's at 168. We're gonna see what other fights he's gonna pull up, but he's at 168. Okay. And this is another thing. See, this is what I don't like about boxing. The politics in it. When is Gennady Golovkin going to step up and go up to 168? Everybody want to talk about Canelo versus Golovkin. Where's it going to be at 160? Canelo got to lose weight now to go back down in weight to face Gennady Golovkin? Is this the bullshit that you guys are going? Anyway, I'm just saying, man. It's like there's a lot of stupidity in boxing today. And you can see the names rolling across the screen. Canelo versus Triple G. But everybody's going in on Canelo because it's okay to hate on Canelo. Right? That's the problem I have with you fans. You're not consistent. Canelo beat your boy. He beat Triple G's ass twice. And y'all sucky. Y'all angry. He beat Triple G. That's what it is. That's what it is. Because y'all wanted Triple G to whoop his ass. And instead, he beat Triple G's ass. Y'all was rejoicing. Oh, Clint Buterol was found in Canelo stuff. Up to this day, he being cleared of it. Y'all still going with the Clint Buterol stuff. I'm showing you the hypocrisy in boxing. This is my opinion. You guys can have another opinion. Roll up in here. Say your opinion. I'll back off. I won't say nothing. I'm just listen to you. I'll let you have your piece. But my point is, I look at the hypocrisy in boxing. People taking shots at the top guy. I take shots at Clarissa Shields. She the top right now in boxing. You know she the top. When Layla Ali with her hating ass comes straight out of the woodworks and say, oh, she can't beat me. I'll beat her ass. But you ain't acting on it. You all talk. But you a legend. And I see sulky legends doing that. Look at what Mike Tyson trying to do. Mike Tyson is trying to make the matchups and the fights we want to see with Triller. He trying to get Teofimo Lopez to sign with Triller so he can get Teofimo Lopez fighting all these young cats. That's what he really want to do. He don't want Teofimo Lopez just making a big paycheck. No. That's that 6 million Teofimo Lopez is about to get, or whatever he's supposed to get, as an investment in Teofimo Lopez fighting the fights that we want to see. But he's willing to pay Teofimo Lopez to make that turn, that move. Because Bob Arum will try. If Triller buy out Teofimo Lopez's contract, which is all Bob Arum only care about money anyway, then probably we could get the fights we want to see. Because at the end of the day, the fight fans want to see certain fights, right? That's the whole point behind it, right? But my thing anyway is, regardless of whether we get the fights we want to see immediately or not, when I see a good fight, I'm going to say it's a good fight. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong with that. So anyway, Triple G was the other opponent that he faced. And then he faced Danny Jacobs. Again, absolutely good opponent. Very good unification fight. Of course, I expected Canelo afterwards. I remember what I said. I said he don't have to face Demetrius Andrew now that he faced Danny Jacobs. So I remember saying that. I said he don't have to. He kind of proved his point because Danny Jacobs was like the top guy. But Canelo said he wanted to unify the titles. He said it. I didn't say it. So when he said that, I was expecting him to go out there and face Demetrius Andrew, and I put my word on it. I said, man, Canelo gonna face Demetrius Andrew. And then he didn't. And Demetrius Andrew, as we all know, he's 33. He's going to be coming out of his official prime, meaning, usually they say when you pass 33 years of age, you're out of your prime. He don't look like he's out of his prime. He still seems to be functioning the same way, but because he don't got no wear and tear on him, you know what I mean? Like that in terms of fights. Of course, when you talk about wear and tear, you're also talking about outside of fights. Hold on a second. I got to step away from the phone for just a brief moment. Hey. Yeah, experience is the key. So anyway, yeah, Danny Jacobs, and then we had Sergey Kovalev. The Sergey Kovalev fight was one of the most controversial of the fights, I think, out there. In that, out of the clear blue sky, Canelo wants Kovalev. Well, not really out of the clear blue sky. He always wanted Kovalev, but whatever. Just like how he wanted Cotto, right? But he's willing to jump up 2 weight classes to face Sergey Kovalev, right? Instead of facing Demetrius Andrew. And I'm saying to myself, that sounds like a duck goose. And then top of that, he requests to become franchise champion so he can be freed up to face Sergey Kovalev. This is the fight he wants. Nobody's saying no. Okay, when I initially saw that, I said, what the hell is this? This is a crappy fight. We just saw Kovalev almost lose the fight against Anthony Yarde. And we all know what Canelo's very good at doing. Why? Oh, why? We need to see Sergey Kovalev versus Canelo. Now, after seeing the fight, I realized why. Kovalev actually boxed a lot better than even in the Anthony Yarde fight. Okay, he boxed a hell of a lot better. He never got to really use his power like he wanted to against Canelo because Canelo kept on blocking a lot of the shots and he had good defense and stuff. But you saw at least glimpses of it in the 10th round when he really tried to, attack Canelo and get him out of there, right? Because he was gassing out. And the thing about it is, if Kovalev used to take better care of his body, probably would have been a greater force in boxing. But both Andre Ward knew and Canelo knew Kovalev didn't take good care of his body, right? And because of that, that's why Canelo, I think if there's anything that Canelo knew more than anything else was this guy was beatable because he didn't take good care of his body. He had great boxing acumen, we see in the Canelo fight and in the yard fight and in the Eliter Alvarez fight. Stop boxing Eliter Alvarez before he was stopped. And where does he get stopped? 7, 8, 9 rounds, right? Always. Whether it's Ward or whatever, 7, 8, 9, right? He gets stopped. Why? Because your body's not in the conditioning it should be in because of improper practices, right? You can't be drinking and thinking that you can box. So boxing is a thing where you have to commit your body, mind, and everything to boxing. And Kovalev wasn't that dedicated like that. Trained his ass off in training sessions, but wasn't dedicated like that. And so Buddy McGirl's strategy was a good one. And, it was a good strategy, but it's just that Canelo knew this guy, he could take him out. He knew, and then he had the style that was just all wrong for Kovalev. So when I think about that fight, I think to myself, it's not the age of Kovalev so much that is undoing. It's his conditioning. I believe that is his undoing. And with the case of Billy Joe Saunders, again, if you're not dedicated to the craft of boxing, that will be exposed against a top tier guy like Canelo. And that was always the if factor. When you look at Billy Joe Saunders and you look at Demetrius Andrew, there's not much difference between them in terms of their approach to boxing, their style of boxing, and everything. The only difference is we're pretty sure that for his entire career and his entire life, Demetrius Andrew has committed himself to boxing completely. So his health and well-being is much better than Billy Joe Saunders. And we've seen it in the scales and the lackluster performances by Billy Joe Saunders. He's up or he's down based on the fact that Billy Joe Saunders, he's not consistent and he's not a live a lifestyle that's consistent. Whereas Demetrius Andrew has been a very controlled and consistent guy. Now, fair point again. It's the fact that Billy Joe Saunders has faced better competition than Demetrius Andrew career-wise, okay, in his pro career. So that's a fact. Now, I heard some people arguing on Facebook boxing group, that Demetrius Andrew had beaten everybody in the amateurs. That may be the case, where he beat named guys in the amateurs, including the Charlos. But the truth be told, that's the amateurs. We're in the pros now. So it's a totally different game. In the pros, don't let anybody fool you. And while he has a very difficult style to beat, no doubt about that. Some people even compare him to Mayweather, which I don't think is a good comparison, but nonetheless, whatever. I gotta say, if you are in the amateurs, it's a different system, one, and two, you're under different rules. It's a different system, So beating people in the amateurs doesn't necessarily mean that you beat them in the pros. Remember, in the pros, it's about doing damage. It's about doing damage. So the 10-point must system is not the same system as in the amateurs, where you're hitting a spot and it's about accuracy. More on points. Okay. And we know Andre has dog in him. We've seen it a number of times. I'm not questioning the dog. If I had to see him face Billy Joe Saunders, between him and Billy Joe Saunders, in spite of Billy Joe Saunders' competition, I'd favor Demetrius Andrew slightly to beat Billy Joe Saunders. But you never know.
And that's why Billy Joe Saunders could surprise us and beat Canelo, in spite of all the experience that Canelo has with all these champions, including Calum Smith. Here's what I don't understand from the fighters, and to show their ignorance of boxing. Or maybe they know better, but they decided to send this out to the media and the people. When David Benavidez said he doesn't understand why Caleb Smith didn't fight Canelo, he was trying to, but obviously, Calum Smith fights from range. So, because he was cramped for space, couldn't get his punches off. Canelo cramped him for space, made him put away his jab. Made him put away his jab. And David Benavidez is a young guy in boxing. So for him to say that, either he knows better, but he decided to say it, or he's willfully ignorant of the fact that Canelo has several different tools to nullify the jab. Nullify it. And I'm surprised Demetrius Andrew also doesn't understand what Canelo is doing. Andre should know what Canelo is doing. You know, the one guy who I notice is silent on what Canelo does in boxing. He may say fuck Canelo or whatever, but he doesn't talk about boxing. When he mentions Canelo's name is Jamal Charlo. And Billy Joe Saunders, he's careful in what he says. After he saw what happened to Calum Smith, and rightfully so. Canelo has a jump on all his contemporaries. All that 30, 31-year-olds. He got a jump on you. He was able to face the best fighters and learn from every single one of them. Because it's not just about beating a great fighter, or a good fighter, or a world champion, or top tier fighter. But as we all know, it's about picking up things from them to add to your game. If you're not doing that, what's the use fighting them? So those are some of the opponents Canelo faced. Now when it comes to Jamal Charlo, Jamal, he's faced 3 world champions that you see in front of you there. He faced the oldest super welterweight champion, Gennady Golovkin. Hmm. In this case, youth trumped experience. Huh. And he battered Bundridge all around the ring. Bundridge is still fighting to this day. Kudos to him. Um, he had a very good fight with Austin Trout. Austin Trout gave him a good fight. Austin Trout being a former world champion really put him to the test. They gave him the decision over Trout and his brother too. That's boxing. He faced at the time future world champion Julian Williams. Went on to beat Jared Hurd. Become unified WBA IBF world champion. Jamal Charlo also faced some other good fighters like Matt Korobov. He's not a world champion, but was a top level contender. Faced Andy Lee, recently Chris Eubank Jr. Good fighter. He also faced Sergey Kovalev. Derevchenko faced Danny Jacobs, Triple G in a fight. Both fights, people thought were very close, and maybe he got the nod in both. Jamal Charlo's fight with Derevchenko was definitive. There was no question that Charlo won that fight. Billy Joe Saunders. A contemporary of Canelo, like Jamal Charlo at 160, moved up to 168. Billy Joe Saunders faced Chris Eubank Jr. got a win over him. Was a competitive fight. Early, Billy Joe took control of the fight. Was dominated. Late, Chris Eubank Jr. came on strong. Billy Joe held on to the victory. Even though Chris Eubank Jr. has never become world champion, he's still a name in the sport in his prime, 31 years old. In addition, Billy Joe really showed up for his win against Andy Lee and David Lemieux. He showed what he's possibly capable of doing. And he's going to be facing Canelo next. David Benavidez, the youngest in the lot. He beat Ronald Gavril to win the vacant WBC super middleweight title. Lost the title because he was found for using cocaine. So he was stripped. He would come back to win the title again against Anthony Durrell. Right after he was stripped because he couldn't make weight. It's tremendously early in his career. Of course, to say how his career will go, he's very young. He's learning boxing by leaps and bounds. So we'll see how far this journey takes him. He wants to face Canelo. And there are a lot of fans who think he's ready for Canelo to give him his greatest threat. I believe Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, and I've said this all along, the higher ranked fighters are Saunders, Andre, then Plant, Smith, and Benavidez last. The boxing public thinks of it in the other direction, which is amazing. Size, strength, and power, and be able to throw combinations doesn't make you a threat. Boxing IQ, slickness, the ability to hit and not get hit. Those things make you a threat. Styles make fights. Canelo's been with some really heavy punches. And it did him absolutely nothing. Because he has defense. So it's not so much about the punchers as it is about how slick they are. How much they don't get hit. How much they can hit you without you hitting them. the sweet science of boxing. Now, I listened to Mikey Garcia, and he's talking about how Caleb Plant, he's not a draw. He's got to get the fans riled up about something. Never saw Victor Postol as a draw. He stopped Lucas Matisse. Styles make fights. Sometimes an explosive fight can happen because one guy is a search and destroyer, and the other guy counterpuncher. Could make for a very action-packed, exciting fight. Marcos Maradona, Floyd Mayweather. Migo Cotto, Floyd Mayweather. They say Floyd's a boring fighter. Those weren't boring fights. Styles make fights. When I hear guys like Canelo or otherwise say this guy's a boring fighter, translation, difficult style. Don't really want to face him. Fans like compelling matchups. Fans love 50-50 fights. Fans like fights that can go one way or the other. It's not just about action. This is why you hear the fans complaining about Canelo's competition. Because they think competition is not up to Canelo standard where they can beat him. But they very much can beat Canelo. They very much can. Goes back to having a knowledge of boxing. It's not the biggest guys that will beat up the smaller guys. Boxing is something that doesn't have to do with the hardest punches. Lots of guys were the hardest punches in their time. They weren't the best. In Ali's time, and Ali was not this heavy punching, one punch knockout heavyweight. Ernie Schaefer's was. Ron Lyle was. George Foreman was. Ali beat them all. So, in boxing, the biggest, baddest guy out there with the hardest punch doesn't necessarily win all the fights. It's about what you know, how smart you are. That's what makes boxing what it is, right? If it's just about the biggest, baddest guy out there, then Deontay Wilder would have beaten Tyson Fury. Right? So when they say you're the baddest man on the planet, what is that? What does it mean? So how much of a role does experience play in top tier fighters, particularly in this division 160, 175, it plays a major key, of course. It does. But it only plays as much of a major key as the boxer evolves with the experience that they have done. And truly, Canelo has evolved as a fighter. I hear a lot of people say, oh, he hasn't evolved much. Well, I think he has. Small things, all things. I think he's evolved quite a lot. I think that his boxing has changed. He's not just a combination puncher throwing a whole bunch of combinations. He's a pot shotter now. He wasn't always a pot shotter. He works on his angles of approach as if it's secondary. You know, his foot placement is impeccable. His precise footwork has even become more precise. You know, and he's worked out the science of how to walk down a bigger guy. So that in itself is a mouthful. That's a lot that goes into that. And his defense, he still keeps his defense tight. So yes, he's done quite a lot of late. That makes him someone that, hold on a second. Who is this person? Just has a face on them. I don't think I can let you in, but I'm going to try. Yes, I can invite you in for some reason. Yes, hi. Good day to you. I can see you in the private chat. The guest area, but I can't let you in as a guest for some reason. It's just saying edit name. What do you want me to call you? Okay, the person has left. Probably just a troll. Anyways, so top tier experience, especially at the highest level of boxing. Okay, you're talking about pound for pound fighters, you know, that you get experience with, and you know, seasoned multiple championship world champions is different to beating just a world champion or someone who just became a world champion, you know. And there's a difference between facing top tier opposition and opposition that's opposition, good opposition, but they're not top tier. When you're talking pound for pound opposition, that's crazy. And so experience, you can't pay for that. You can't pay for veteran experience if you're learning from it. You see, I think the difference with Vasily Lomachenko was I really can't say how much he learned to evolve his style when he faced certain champions and certain great fighters. He employed his algorithm and beat them. And I don't know if he grew as a fighter, you know, and I don't know if he grows as a fighter with the Teofimo Lopez loss. He's just going to apply the same algorithm he's done, or he's going to make an adjustment to how he fights. But guys like Canelo, they've made adjustments to how they fight. So Canelo, more pot shots now, and he just throws combinations. He's learned to be more composed, take his time to break down a fighter and then get him out of it. So it's just a totally different. He even discussed how immature he was in the Austin Trout fight. He could have finished Austin Trout if he had just paced himself. Instead, he kind of got excited and tried to go for the fences, and as such, he wasted a lot of energy trying to get rid of Trout when he should have just paced himself, and he would have got him out of there. So experience it plays a major key, especially when you grow as a fighter because of the guys you face. Because remember, the only way to learn in boxing is to box. So I do believe, you know, as Floyd said, experience plays a major key. But there's a lot of times where guys supposedly have a lot of experience but haven't learned a thing from it. They haven't grown from their experiences.
And as such, they may be highly experienced fighters and they may have had a lot of top tier fighters on their resume, but their style is pretty much the same and they haven't really changed anything and they haven't grown as a fighter. You have to grow. You have to keep on growing every day. You have to keep on improving every day as a fighter. And I think Canelo has done that. And I think it's just a bullseye mark on his back. This is my opinion. Bullseye mark on his back, when it comes to, I mean, come on now. The guy dwarfs anybody else's resume when it comes to top quality, top tier opposition. And then, of course, he's added another top tier opponent to his resume in Calum Smith, who was defended. I think he defended his WBA title in multiple times, right? Since beating George Groves. So it wasn't like he was just, a one-off champion. It was a guy who had fought. I think John Ryder beat him. He should have rematched John Ryder before facing Canelo, in my personal opinion. I think that would have improved his performance and improved how he would have dealt with Canelo. But he didn't do that. So maybe he takes up that fight with John Ryder now. And but I hear he's trying to move up in weight to 175, which I don't think is a sensible thing. I think he should stay at 168 and just fight, first of all, and prepare himself and grow from the Canelo experience. Hopefully he matures and grows from that experience because, once again, it's all about growing as a fighter, developing and honing your craft and realizing what works for you and what doesn't work for you and getting rid of the things that don't work for you and refining the things that work. It's a journey. So we're going to go on 2 hours and then I'm going to call it a day because I had to make a trip, get something, and then come back here. But somebody tried to jump in as a guest, and for some reason they were not allowed to come in as a guest because I couldn't allow them. I guess it's because they had a symbol instead of their name, probably as a person or individual. But as what you need, I just decided to discuss this topic as we were going through it. I always say that people need to, boxing is a teaching sport. What I mean by that is, if you're not humble enough to listen and learn those people who know better, then you're not going to go anywhere in your career. And we've seen it with Sergey Kovalev, where he wasn't willing to listen to John David Jackson, who's now providing excellent training for Clarissa Shields. The more you listen is the more you learn and pick up things, especially from people who are former champions. John David Jackson, former 154-pound champion. So, I mean, you want to be able to pick up things from the people who know what they're talking about. And you can discard the things that don't work for you, So Clarissa Shields' fight is going to be coming around pretty soon. We examined the resume of the top champions from 160 to 175. Did I look at everybody? I think I did. And interestingly, from all of these resumes, Canelo's resume is just by far miles ahead of everybody else. And that's just amazing that a guy who's 30 years old, contemporary of Jamal Charlo, and contemporary of Chris Eubank and Billy Joe Saunders, this guy has accomplished a lot more in boxing than those guys, and he's learned a lot more in boxing. So I don't really know, and I can't predict the winner for Billy Joe Saunders versus Canelo Alvarez. That's a very good fight, and I guess as the preparation for the fight goes along, we'll find out a distinct winner. But I think that Canelo has ample experience to be able to deal with a fighter like Billy Joe Saunders, or Demetrius Andrew, or Jamal Charlo, or David Benavidez. He's got ample experience to draw upon from all the fighters that he has faced in his career. Hopefully, he'll learn a lot from the fight against Billy Joe Saunders, or fight against Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrew or whoever that he decides to face. Will he continue his campaign at 168 or will he go up to 175? I don't know. But what I do know is at this point in time, also these fighters should face each other. I think these fighters can gain a lot of experience facing each other. And so I hope for example, that David Benavidez won't sit on his laurels and will actually try to make maybe a fight with Caleb Plant still, if that's the offers on the table, because Caleb Plant might not see advantage in facing David Benavidez. But then again, just for the sake of facing David Benavidez, that would be a good fight. And again, it would help out whoever wins in terms of when they face Canelo. So whoever has the IBF strap, at least they've tested themselves out. I always try to explain to people that sometimes the best way to sharpen iron is just to face the guy who you have to face. And just face it, because you need to be tested. And I just don't think Caleb Plant right at this point in time is tested enough to face Canelo. But that's just my personal opinion. He might surprise me because of his boxing IQ and the way he dedicates himself to the craft. He may surprise me and beat Canelo. Yeah, he has the style to do it. And he brings a lot of interesting tools to the table. He has to stop being so repetitious with certain things, but and predictable. But yes, he brings a lot of tools to the table. So you never know. Huh? You never know. It's very. It really depends on the skills of the fighter, the skills of the boxer at the end of the day. Anyways, people, we're going up on 2 hours. I'll try to wrap it up in the second hour. But I will be talking more boxing. You can check me out as what you need. This was a session for you guys to come through. Somebody attempted to come through, but they couldn't get in. So that's a little bit of a pity, because I really wanted to see that happen. But it is good. Just talked on this topic, and just expressed my views on the topic. But I really wanted to hear you guys' views on the topic. But it's all good. I'm what you need. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. About to close off this session right now. And I wish you guys the best. Peace. We're out.